4 years ago today, Mark Zuckerberg announced Facebook and Instagram would indefinitely block then-President Trump's accounts in the wake of the January 6 attacks. The CEO wrote on his own Facebook page, quote, "We believe the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great." So that was exactly 4 years ago. Last year, the accounts were reinstated. Today, Zuckerberg announced the rebranded Meta, which includes Facebook and Instagram, will now end its fact-checking program. User-generated community notes, which now police misinformation, much as they do on X, formerly known as Twitter. So today, in response to a question from CNN's Steve Contorno, Trump said this about the announcement.
Well, I watched their news conference, and I thought it was a very good news conference. I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive.
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Donny O'Sullivan has more on the new policy.
I've seen some of the stories that you're talking about around this election.
Mark Zuckerberg just days after the 2016 election.
The idea that fake news on Facebook, of which it's a very small amount of the content, influence the election in any way, I think, is a pretty crazy idea.
But 12 months later, as the full scope of the role of misinformation and Russian trolls became more clear, Zuckerberg apologized, saying his comments were dismissive and that he regretted them.
What's clear is that in 2016, we were not as on top of a number of issues as we should have, whether it was Russian interference or fake news.
By the time the 2018 midterms came around, Facebook was showing off its so-called election war room.
It's really the culmination of 2 years of massive investments that we've made.
The company also launched a global fact-checking program.
No one tells us that they want to see misinformation. Right? That's why we work with independent fact checkers to stop hoaxes that are going viral from spreading.
The fact checkers, I don't trust them.
But soon many conservatives, and Trump supporters specifically, took issue with fact-check labels appearing over their Facebook posts.
Anything I put on there about our president is generally only on for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden they're fact-checking me saying this, that, and the other thing, which I know is not true. Their fact checkers wrong.
But Zuckerberg made one group exempt from being fact-checked on his platforms: politicians.
So you won't take down lies, or you will take down lies? I think it's just a pretty simple yes or no.
Congresswoman,
I'm not talking about spin. I'm talking about actual
yes, in most cases, in a democracy, I believe that people should be able to see for themselves what politicians that they may or may not vote for
so
are
you
saying,
won't take
judge
them
their
down.
Character for themselves.
In 2024, as candidate Trump gained in the polls, he had this to say about Zuckerberg in a book published 2 months before the election. If he does anything illegal this time, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. After Trump won the election, Zuckerberg met with him at Mar-a-Lago in late November. Then on Tuesday morning,
hey everyone.
Zuckerberg announced he was shutting down Meta's fact-checking program in the US.
After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote non-stop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact-checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US.
Too politically biased. That was a very disappointing thing to hear.
Alan Duke, a former CNN journalist, runs a fact-checking organization hired by Facebook.
If in the 6 years that we were fact-checking for Meta, we had been politically biased at all, they never said anything. We never heard one example of where that had happened.
Were you surprised by Mark Zuckerberg's decision to shut down the fact-checking program?
I was and I wasn't. There's been a lot of political pressure on journalists generally and fact checkers specifically from the Trump administration and its supporters. I'm surprised that the tech platforms in general are being so accommodating to the government.
And Anderson, look, I mean, it is pretty clear that Meta and Zuckerberg are trying to placate Trump here in many ways with a lot of the moves they've made in the past few weeks. But if you really track what Zuckerberg was saying over the years through 2016, 2020, you could tell his heart was never in this. He never really wanted to have Facebook in this position where they were applying these fact-check labels. So although this is a huge change, a seismic change for the rules on the platform, and remember, billions of people use this platform around the world, millions here in the United States, for Zuckerberg himself, I do think this is going back to the roots of how he sees this platform, which is a bit hands-off.
Yeah, well, there's also an economic incentive, which we're going to talk about right now. Antonio Sullivan, thank you. Perspective from Scott Galloway, professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. He's also host of the Prof G Markets podcast and co-host of Pivot with Kara Swisher. Scott, what's your reaction to this decision by Meta, especially the timing, the political backdrop, obviously?
Well, the timing's pretty obvious. This was, essentially, Mark Zuckerberg is one of the most brilliant businessmen in history, and we should stop using the term stakeholder value. It's all about shareholder value, and this will reduce their safety and content moderation budget, which was $5 billion in 2022. So if they can cut that in half without the need to moderate content and reduce their safety and security team, at a P of 30, you're looking at a $75 billion increase in market cap. This is $10 billion in Zuckerberg's pocket. The more meta effect, if you will, is it'll weaken democracies. One of the keys, or the three pillars of really strong democracies, are trust in our institutions, shared values or shared stories, and social networks that have a lot of trust. And this will weaken all three because the level of misinformation is about to skyrocket across the mediums where between 1/2 and 2/3 of Americans get their news.
I just want to play what President-elect Trump said today at Mar-a-Lago when asked by CNN's Steve Contorno about the Meta decision.
I watched their news conference, and I thought it was a very good news conference. I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook, I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive.
Steve also asked him if Meta's decision to get rid of fact checkers was in direct response to threats he's made to Mark Zuckerberg in the past, and Trump said, yeah, probably. The extent to which a lot of these tech billionaires are kind of following or trying to play catch up, I guess, with Elon Musk and making inroads with the new administration.
The best investment, the best trade of 2024 was Elon Musk put $250 million into the Trump campaign. And since then, the value of his companies and his stake in those companies is up by about $140 billion. So that's about a 5,600% return. And
that's not any change in in Tesla, in the output or anything.
Nothing to do with the company.
Right.
Nothing to do with their operating margins, their innovation, their sales. It's based on a general assumption that America has become a full kleptocracy like Russia, that the largest, deepest pocketed customer in the history of our modern economy, the US government, will effectively is now pay to play and will shuffle contracts, monies, and impose regulatory punishment on the competitors to the companies who do not invest in the Republican Party or in his inaugural campaign, as evidenced by the fact that very few of these tech executives invested in the inaugural campaign fund for Biden, and they are all doing it for Trump. We have gone full klep. And if you don't think this hurts everyone, this raises prices, and for the little guy or the companies that don't want to engage in this type of pay for play, it hurts them. This will increase prices and weaken our democracy. This is absolutely no different than how Putin became the wealthiest man in the world.
Do you think this is a long-term change in the political direction of these tech companies, or would they shift course when the president-elect leaves office?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two things going on here. This is good for shareholder value for Meta to not have to live up to the standards of traditional media companies. News Corp decided to circulate misinformation around Dominion voting machines, despite the fact they knew that was false information. They were sued because it resulted in economic harm against Dominion, and they were punished to the tune of about $750 million. What happened at News Corp on Fox was a dumpster fire compared to the nuclear mushroom cloud of what took place on Meta, yet Meta is immune. So what you have is these companies that are circulating, or kind of a misinformation Lollapalooza, quite frankly, are just running away with it in terms of profitability, in terms of shareholder value. So they're totally driven by shareholder value. They're doing their job. We're not doing our job in terms of electing representatives who have the backbone to stand up to attempts to weaponize the government and still believe in a democratic America where there's competition, where misinformation, where a lack of truth, a lack of trust in our institutions remain pillars of our society. That seems to be eroding, but they will go where the puck goes, and that is whatever increases the value of their shares.
Scott Galloway, I appreciate your time. Thank you.